Hi everyone. I wanted to talk to you about NatWest. I'm a big fan of NatWest. I've worked with the organization before, quite a while ago now, but I remain a customer and close to the company in that I follow a lot of the NatWest executive output. And one such output today is from Wendy, the Chief Digital and Information Officer at NatWest, and she's written about how they're using generative AI, and I think it's very much worthwhile following a lot of the NatWest senior executives, in particular Wendy Redshaw on LinkedIn, but also a lot of their other data and AI executives and SMEs, simply because they post a lot. They post a lot, and they do have a NatWest. Just Google this NatWest AI blog, and it's very useful as a source of what are they doing. Now, I am routinely asked, what are other banks doing? And I have my ways, right? I've got lots of contacts, lots of connections across the ecosystem in the Gulf, in Europe, in the States, a little bit in Asia, but typically around Europe, where I I talk to executives all the time, confidentially, on what they're doing, and that's how I get the case studies that I need to talk about what's happening in financial services for a lot of the training and the advisory activity that I do. But it's even easier. It's even easier when they talk publicly about it. And I like it when they talk publicly because I can then source a lot of these particular case studies that I'm talking about, because often I have to say, look, I'm sorry, it's confidential. That's because it's been told to me confidentially. I can't say who, or give the identity of the bank. But in this case, Wendy is publicly talking about what they've been doing with their generative AI activities. Now, NatWest has been public about their approach with GenAI. They've been doing a lot with it in a careful and controlled manner, because the minute you say Gen AI or generative AI to anyone near compliance, risk, or the like, or any senior executive, that tends to get quite worrying, really quite worrying and concerning, because of the hallucination. Yes, there we go. Sorry, because of the hallucination issues and risks around that. Now, when I'm talking to banks and to other financial services executives about where AI is adding, or generative AI is adding a lot of value, typically it's around conversation. There's other options here, but for generative AI in financial services, it usually involves some degree of conversation or use of language, and that's where there's a lot of value. Wendy is talking about one of the pilots that they've been running with their chatbot Cora. And now, typically, what happens is there'll be a big long conversation, right? And Cora, their chatbot, will do its level best to answer the question or query in that conversation. But they need to be looked at. These things need to be looked at and analyzed. Why? Because you want to know how is the chatbot reacting? What is it saying? Are the answers really good? Could the answers be tweaked? How much capability have you got to tweak them? What kind of questions were the customers asking? Did the chatbot perform? How can we improve? Okay, now that's where this is a really interesting use case, and if you like, there's a slightly, of course, yeah, yes, but even today, there's lots of financial institutions, they're not using generative AI at all, and certainly not for this purpose. So you've got dozens of conversations happening every minute with Cora, if not more than that. And what are those topics about? How are they being summarized? How can you learn from them? Well, what the team have been doing is using generative AI to summarize 7,000 plus conversations. So instead of humans, which is typically literally how it's done, right? Humans scrolling through and reading the conversations that are taking place with their chatbots, right? That's one of the ways you verify what's being said. But you also need a summary. Like what's going on? Okay, generative AI brilliant for this. Brilliant. So NatWest, Wendy is saying, they've summarized 7,000 conversations, and in doing so, freeing up their brilliant colleagues to support customers rather than sifting through lengthy transcripts. Now, I think that's really, really smart and a very good use of generative AI. And as I'm saying, there is a bit of a really? Yeah, of course, of course. It's obvious, right? That's a great capability of generative AI. But just as I say, I want to underscore that a lot of organizations simply aren't doing this. They're not. They haven't deployed the tech to do it. Now, one of the points that Wendy's making is during the pilot, she says her colleagues have been reviewing the full transcript, right? So sitting and reading everything, right, as well. But alongside the AI generated summary. And then what they've been doing is scoring 1 to 5 for sentiment and accuracy, right? So this does need to be done, right? So humans reading and saying, okay, look, fine. I now understand the conversation that the chatbot and the customer have had. What's the AI say? What's GenAI say? And they're marking that out of 5 to try and get a view, a quantitative view of the quality of the capability of GenAI. What's interesting is the humans, her colleagues, have given an average of 4.95 out of 5 for the capability, the rating of the sentiment and accuracy of the summary. Now, what that means is the technology is working really well. You do need to go through this pain, right? I think you do, because this is a regulated industry, and when you and I are saying to regulators, to others, look, based on our analysis, we think customers are saying this, and it's when someone says, "Sorry, what's that analysis? How was that done?" And if you say, "Oh, it was ChatGPT," that's okay, but you need to have done the work beforehand to say, "Look, we've tested. Humans read, we read it, and then the AI read it, and actually we agree, to 4.95 out of 5 on average. We think it's brilliant." Having done that work, you can then begin to step back a little bit, right? You still need to keep this going, but you can step back a little bit, saying, look, the technology can really begin to summarize and categorize and start to give us confidence in what the customers are telling us, right? Because what's really important is the metadata around this. What are customers saying today? What are customers complaining about? What are the key issues today, this hour? This is really important. It's very important when you've got 18, 20 million customers, right? When you have a sizable customer base, when if things are going wrong, the impact, not just in the country, but, for the contact center, for the bank itself, if things are going wrong, you want early warning, right? So the potential here is to be able to have the chatbot start to, or maybe not the chatbot itself, but system analyzing the chatbot's content, be able to say, look, this hour, we've seen 3 spikes, and the spikes are around payments, or the system doesn't seem to be working. You might want to go and look at this. You can get some alerts going. It's really, really quite powerful. But now, what technology is NatWest using? Now, having known having worked in the organization, I have half a clue of the technology they're using. And having spoken to a few individuals over the period of time, I genuinely know the tech stack, the public data, right? But here's some more public data, which is really helpful. Thank you, Wendy. She has said, "Are you curious about the tech behind this pilot?" Yes, we are, Wendy. Yes, we are, because we all want to know, who are you using? It's really, really interesting and very helpful for other banks to know this, and for other vendors. So for this particular pilot, we're using the large language model Lama 3.3 from Meta through Watson X. So there we go. And Wendy does point out, with all the guardrails you'd expect. Yes, Wendy, I know, of course. This is really important, right? It's easy to forget that in financial services and other regulated industries, you've really got to do it the right way. So the correct guardrails is very important. But that's fantastic, Wendy. Thank you so much for publishing that. And there's some interesting insight, right? Now I know it can just Gen AI to analyze text. Yes, but look at the amount of time and effort this is saving. Fantastic. So just a quick one. I'll put a link to Wendy's post in the show notes. And thank you, Wendy and Team NatWest.